The suitcase on my bed looked pathetically empty, a reflection of how little I had to show for 28 years of life. A few worn t-shirts, jeans with fraying hems, and a single photo of my baby boy Liam, sleeping peacefully in his crib. Outside my apartment window, rain pelted against the glass, matching the tears that threatened to spill down my cheeks. "It's for the best, Emma," I whispered to myself, the sound of my own voice startling in the quiet room. "You're doing this for Liam." My fingers trembled as I folded a tiny blue onesie, the fabric soft from countless washes. The scent of baby powder clung to it, and for a moment, I pressed it to my face, inhaling deeply. 6 months old, and already the center of my universe. The thought of taking him away from the only home he'd known twisted my stomach into knots, but staying in Chicago had become impossible. The bus tickets to Portland lay on my nightstand, departing tomorrow at 6 a.m., a new city, a fresh start. Somewhere Daniel would never find us. The mere thought of his name sent a chill racing down my spine. I'd been so naive, so desperate for affection, that I'd fallen for his charm without questioning who he really was. By the time I discovered the truth about his business ventures, I was already pregnant with his child, a child he didn't know existed. I glanced at the baby monitor, the soft glow illuminating Liam's peaceful breathing from the next room. My son had his father's striking blue eyes, but I prayed that was all he'd inherited from him. The rest, the darkness, the violence, the empire built on other people's suffering, I'd protect him from all of it. The knock at my door was so soft I almost missed it beneath the drumming of rain. For a moment I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. No one knew where I lived. I'd made sure of it, renting this rundown apartment under a false name, paying in cash, keeping to myself. The only person who had this address was my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who occasionally watched Liam when I picked up shifts at the diner. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I crept to the door, careful to avoid the squeaky floorboard in the hallway. With trembling hands, I peered through the peephole. Mrs. Chen stood in the dimly lit corridor, wringing her hands nervously. Relief washed over me as I unlatched the chain and opened the door. "Emma, dear," she whispered, her voice quivering. "There's a man downstairs asking about you. Very well dressed. Has 2 big men with him." My blood turned to ice. "Did you tell him anything?" I managed to ask, already knowing the answer. Mrs. Chen was kind, but she was also easily intimidated. Shame clouded her eyes. "I'm sorry. He knew your real name already, showed me a picture, said he was worried about you." The walls seemed to close in around me. How had he found me? I'd been so careful covering my tracks, using cash only, staying off social media. Yet somehow Daniel had discovered where I was hiding. "Thank you for warning me," I said, already backing into my apartment. "I'll handle it." Mrs. Chen nodded, her eyes darting nervously toward the stairwell. "Be careful, dear." He didn't seem like the patient type. As soon as I closed the door, I sprang into action, adrenaline overriding my fear. I had minutes, maybe seconds. Abandoning the half-packed suitcase, I rushed to Liam's room, scooping him gently from his crib. He stirred but didn't wake, his warm weight against my chest the only thing keeping me from complete panic. My mind raced through options. The fire escape? Too noisy. And they were probably watching the building. The back exit? Likely covered as well. I was trapped. A mouse in a maze with nowhere to run. The sound of footsteps in the stairwell echoed through the thin walls, heavy, deliberate steps that made the old wooden stairs creak in protest. I clutched Liam tighter, backing into the corner of his nursery, as if I could somehow melt into the faded wallpaper. The footsteps stopped outside my door. No knock this time. Just the metallic scrape of a key sliding into the lock. A key. He had a key to my apartment. The door swung open slowly, the hinges groaning. I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall, knowing there was nowhere to hide, no escape from what was coming. Then I heard his voice, smooth as velvet and just as suffocating. "Emma? I know you're here. Daniel Valenti, the man whose bed I'd shared for 8 months before discovering the truth. The father of my child, the head of Chicago's most feared crime family. His expensive cologne reached me before he did. That familiar blend of sandalwood, and something darker, more dangerous. I'd once found that scent intoxicating. Now it made me want to gag. I could run to the window, scream for help. But what good would it do? Daniel owned half the police force in this district, and even if someone did come, they'd never stand a chance against his men. So I stayed frozen, clutching our sleeping son as Daniel's footsteps moved methodically through my small apartment. The squeak of my bedroom door opening, the rustle as he examined the half-packed suitcase on my bed, planning a trip without saying goodbye. His voice was closer now, just outside the nursery. "That's not very polite, Emma." The nursery door swung open, and there he stood, Daniel Valenti, framed in the doorway like a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. 6 feet of lethal grace in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. His dark hair was immaculate as always, styled to perfect dishevelment, but it was his eyes that held me captive. Blue as Arctic ice and just as merciless. For a long moment, he simply stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then his gaze dropped to the bundle in my arms, and something shifted in those cold eyes. "You've been keeping secrets," he said softly, taking a step into the room. I instinctively backed up until I hit the wall. "Stay away from us." A smile curved his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Is that any way to greet the father of your child?" "How did you find me?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel moved further into the room, his gaze never leaving Liam. "Did you really think you could hide from me, Emma? In my own city?" He shook his head, as if disappointed by my naivety. "I've known where you were for months. I was giving you space, waiting for you to come to your senses." The revelation struck me like a physical blow. All this time I'd believed I was hidden, protected, when in reality, he'd been watching me, monitoring my every move. "Why now?" I asked, clutching Liam tighter as he began to stir against my chest. Daniel's eyes hardened. "Because you were planning to take my son across the country tomorrow." He nodded toward the nursery window, where one of his men was clearly visible, standing guard in the alley below. "Did you think I wouldn't have people watching the bus stations, checking passenger manifests?" My mind reeled. He knew about Portland. He knew about the bus tickets. The illusion of control I'd been clinging to crumbled completely. Liam chose that moment to wake, blinking up at me with those startling blue eyes. Daniel's eyes. He fussed softly, tiny fists waving in the air. Daniel's expression changed instantly, something almost tender flickering across his features as he stepped closer. "Let me see him," he said, and though his voice was gentle, I recognized the command beneath it. "No." I clutched Liam protectively. "You stay away from him. Emma." My name was a warning on his lips. "Don't make this difficult. I'm not here to hurt either of you. Quite the opposite." "I know what you are," I hissed, finding courage in my desperation to protect my son. "I know what you do, the people you've hurt. I won't let Liam be part of that world." Something dangerous flashed in Daniel's eyes. "You don't know anything," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You've heard rumors, stories told by people who fear me. But you don't know me, Emma. Not really." He moved closer, until he was standing directly in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "And you certainly don't get to decide whether I'm part of my son's life or not." Liam whimpered, perhaps sensing the tension crackling in the air. Daniel's expression softened immediately, his focus shifting entirely to the baby. "What's his name?" he asked, and for the first time since he'd entered the apartment, there was genuine emotion in his voice. "Liam," I answered reluctantly. "Liam James Walsh." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Walsh? My son has my blood in his veins, Emma. He should have my name." "He's not your son," I said, the words coming out more desperate than defiant. "You didn't want him. You didn't even know about him until tonight." "Because you didn't tell me," Daniel countered, anger flashing in his eyes. "You disappeared from my life without a word, carrying my child, and planned to run with him to the other side of the country." His voice was controlled, but I could hear the fury simmering beneath the surface. "Do you have any idea what I would have done to anyone else who tried to take what belongs to me?" A chill ran through me at the implicit threat. "Is that what we are to you? Possessions? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, before gently touching Liam's cheek with one finger. The contrast was jarring, those deadly hands that I knew had ordered unspeakable things, now touching my baby with such reverence. "He has my eyes," Daniel murmured, a note of wonder in his voice. Despite everything, I couldn't deny the truth of his observation. "Yes." Liam, surprisingly, didn't cry at the stranger's touch. Instead, he blinked up at Daniel with curious eyes, then yawned widely. Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a softening I'd never seen before. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the man I'd fallen in love with. Before I knew who he really was, before I discovered the empire of fear he'd built. "I'm taking you both home with me tonight," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Panic surged through me. "No. We're not going anywhere with you." Daniel's eyes hardened again. "This isn't a negotiation, Emma. This apartment isn't safe for my son. The neighborhood is dangerous, the building is falling apart, and there's no security. He deserves better than this, better than a father who kills people." The words escaped before I could stop them. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Careful, Emma. There are some things you shouldn't say out loud." "It's the truth," I persisted, desperation making me reckless. "I found the gun in your desk drawer. I heard the conversations, saw the men who came to your house at all hours. I know what you are, Daniel." He stepped closer, until we were mere inches apart. "What I am," he said softly, dangerously, "is a man who protects what's his, always, at any cost." His eyes bored into mine. "And like it or not, you and Liam are mine." Liam began to cry then, his tiny face scrunching up as he wailed. The sound seemed to penetrate the tension between us, breaking whatever dangerous spell had been building. "He's hungry," I said, seizing the distraction. "I need to feed him." Daniel nodded, stepping back to give me space. "Go ahead. I'll wait." I hesitated, not wanting to turn my back on him, but knowing Liam needed me. Slowly, I moved to the rocking chair in the corner and sat down, adjusting my shirt to nurse Liam. Daniel turned away, giving us at least the illusion of privacy, and walked to the window to look out at the rain-soaked alley below. As Liam nursed, I frantically tried to think of a way out of this situation. Daniel had found me once. He would find me again. Running was no longer an option. But staying meant subjecting Liam to Daniel's world, a world of violence and danger that I'd been desperate to shield him from. "I've been renovating the east wing of the house," Daniel said suddenly, still staring out the window. "It's quieter there, away from the main entrance, perfect for a nursery." He glanced over his shoulder at me. "The room next to it has a beautiful view of the garden. It gets the morning sun. You always said you liked waking up to sunlight." The casual intimacy of his words, the reminder of a time when we'd shared not just a bed but our thoughts and preferences, sent an unwelcome shiver through me. It was easier to hate the cold-blooded crime boss than to remember the man who'd brought me coffee in bed and listened intently as I rambled about my dreams. "We're not moving in with you," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Daniel turned fully to face me, leaning against the windowsill. "Yes, you are. Tonight. Pack what you need for a few days. I'll send someone for the rest tomorrow." "You can't just—" "I can," he interrupted, his voice soft but implacable. "And I will. You took 6 months of my son's life from me, Emma. I won't lose another day." Liam had finished nursing and was drifting back to sleep against my chest. I adjusted my clothing and stood, cradling him protectively. "And if I refuse?" Daniel's smile was cold. "Then I'll have my men pack for you." But I doubt Liam would enjoy that commotion. He moved toward the door. "You have 15 minutes. Bring whatever he needs for tonight. Diapers, formula, clothes. Don't bother with the rest. I'll buy it all new." As he turned to leave, his foot caught on something partially hidden beneath the changing table. He bent down and picked up a package of diapers that had fallen from the half-packed diaper bag I'd prepared for our journey. Daniel stared at the package for a long moment, his fingers running over the colorful cartoon characters on the front. When he looked up at me, his eyes held an emotion I couldn't quite name, something between rage and grief. "He's my son too, Emma," he said quietly, placing the diapers on the changing table with unexpected gentleness, whether you want to admit it or not. With that, he left the nursery, pulling the door partially closed behind him. Through the crack, I could see him speaking in low tones to one of his men who had materialized in my living room. I sank back into the rocking chair, Liam's warm weight against my chest, the only thing keeping me grounded. My carefully constructed escape plan had crumbled in minutes. Daniel had found us, claimed us, and in 15 minutes he would take us to his fortress-like mansion on the north side of the city. A prison, no matter how gilded, was still a prison. And I had just become Daniel Valenti's most precious prisoner. The ride to Daniel's mansion was silent, save for Liam's occasional coos from his car seat. Rain pelted the bulletproof windows of the black SUV, distorting the city lights into watery streaks of color. I sat as far from Daniel as the back seat would allow, pressing myself against the door, as if I could somehow phase through it and escape. "He seems calm," Daniel remarked, his eyes fixed on Liam. "Most babies hate car rides." I said nothing, keeping my gaze on the passing streets, mentally mapping our journey. Not that it would help. Even if I managed to escape with Liam, Chicago was Daniel's domain. There wasn't a corner of this city where his influence didn't reach. "You should have told me, Emma." His voice was quiet, controlled, but I could hear the underlying current of anger. "You had no right to keep him from me." "And you had no right to lie to me about who you were," I countered, finally turning to face him. "You let me believe you were a legitimate businessman. You never mentioned that your import business involved drugs and guns, or that your conflict resolution meant people disappeared." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Be very careful about what accusations you throw around." "Or what?" I challenged, recklessness born of desperation making me bold. "You'll make me disappear too?" Daniel's laugh was cold, humorless. "If I wanted to hurt you, Emma, I'd have done it the day you ran." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But you're the mother of my child. That makes you untouchable. Even to me." The SUV slowed, turning through an ornate iron gate that opened automatically at our approach. Daniel's estate loomed ahead, a massive stone mansion set back from the road, surrounded by manicured gardens and a high wall topped with security cameras. I'd been here before, in what felt like another lifetime, when I was just Daniel's girlfriend, blissfully unaware of what paid for all this luxury. 2 armed guards stood at attention as the vehicle pulled up to the main entrance. Daniel exited first, then opened my door and offered his hand. I ignored it, clutching Liam's carrier as I stepped out into the light drizzle. The house was exactly as I remembered, intimidatingly grand, with soaring ceilings and marble floors that echoed with every footstep. But as Daniel led us through the foyer and up the sweeping staircase, I noticed changes. The east wing, which had been rarely used during our time together, was now lit and renovated, just as he'd mentioned. "This way," Daniel said, guiding me down a hallway I'd never explored. He pushed open a door to reveal a nursery that took my breath away. The room was perfect, a space designed with such care that it made my humble nursery in the apartment look pathetic in comparison. A handcrafted wooden crib stood in the center, draped with fine linens. A plush rocking chair sat beside a window overlooking the gardens. The walls were painted a soft blue-gray, adorned with tasteful artwork of sailing ships and woodland creatures. "When did you do this?" I asked, unable to hide my shock. Daniel set down the diaper bag he'd insisted on carrying. "I started renovations the day after I confirmed where you were living. Once I knew about Liam, I had the nursery completed within a week." I stared at him, disbelieving. "You've known about him for how long?" 2 months, he admitted, watching my face carefully. "One of my men saw you at the pediatrician's office. I had your medical records pulled that same day." The violation of privacy should have angered me, but all I felt was a hollow ache in my chest. "So you've been watching us for 2 months, and you chose tonight to intervene? Why?" Daniel moved to the window, looking out at the rain-drenched gardens. "I was giving you time," he said quietly. "Time to come to me on your own. I thought—" He paused, his shoulders tensing. I thought you would eventually realize that he deserves to know his father. Or that you wanted to make sure he was actually yours before making a claim, I said bitterly. He turned, his eyes flashing with anger. I never doubted he was mine, not for a second. He moved toward me, stopping when I instinctively backed away. The timing, his eyes, everything about him screams Valenti. I knew from the first photo I saw. Liam stirred in his carrier, and I set it gently on the floor, unbuckling him and lifting him into my arms. He blinked sleepily, unaware of the tension surrounding him. "May I?" Daniel asked, extending his arms. I hesitated, instinct telling me to refuse, to keep Liam as far from Daniel as possible. But something in his expression, a vulnerability I'd never seen before, made me slowly, reluctantly, pass our son to him. Daniel held Liam with surprising confidence, supporting his head and cradling him against his chest as if he'd done it 1,000 times. "Hello, Liam," he murmured, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I'm your father." Liam stared up at Daniel with wide eyes, his tiny hand reaching up to touch Daniel's chin. Something twisted painfully in my chest at the sight. The undeniable connection between father and son, a bond I'd tried so desperately to prevent. "He's perfect," Daniel said, not taking his eyes off Liam. "Absolutely perfect. He needs consistency," I said, finding my voice. "A normal life. Not this." I gestured to our opulent surroundings, to the armed guards I knew patrolled the grounds. Daniel's expression hardened. "And what kind of life were you giving him in that rundown apartment? Working double shifts at a diner? Leaving him with an elderly neighbor? Barely making rent?" His voice was cutting. "Don't pretend this was about what's best for him. This was about keeping him from me." The accusation stung, partly because it contained a grain of truth. "I was protecting him," I insisted. "From what?" Daniel demanded, his voice rising slightly before he controlled it, conscious of the baby in his arms. "From a father who would give him everything? Security, education, opportunities you couldn't dream of providing on your own? From becoming like you," I whispered, the words hanging heavy in the air between us. Daniel went very still, his eyes locked on mine. For a moment I feared I'd pushed him too far. Then he looked down at Liam, who had fallen asleep against his chest, tiny fingers curled into the fabric of his expensive shirt. "I am what I had to become," he said finally, his voice low. "But Liam will have choices I never had." Before I could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. A woman entered, older, with silver-streaked dark hair and a kind but no-nonsense expression. I recognized her immediately. Maria, Daniel's housekeeper, who had been more of a mother to him than his own had ever been. "Everything is ready, Mr. Valenti," she said, her accent still thick despite decades in America. Her eyes fell on Liam, and her face softened. "So this is the little one. Maria." "You remember Emma," Daniel said, a subtle warning in his tone that this was not the time for questions. Maria nodded to me, her expression carefully neutral. "Of course." "Welcome back, Miss Walsh. Your room is prepared, adjoining the nursery as requested." My room. The words sent a chill through me. This wasn't a visit. It was a relocation. Permanent, if Daniel had his way. "Thank you," I managed, unsure what else to say. "I'll leave you to get settled," Maria said, backing toward the door. "Dinner will be ready whenever you wish to eat." Once she was gone, Daniel gently transferred the sleeping Liam back to my arms. "You must be exhausted," he said, studying my face with unsettling intensity. "Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." He moved to leave, but I caught his arm, surprised by my own boldness. "Daniel, wait. I need to know. What happens now?" He covered my hand with his, the touch sending an unwelcome spark through me. "Now you both stay here, where I can protect you, where Liam can grow up with every advantage, knowing both his parents." "And if I don't want that?" I asked, needing to test the boundaries of my new cage. Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I think we both know that's not an option, Emma." He gently removed my hand from his arm. "This is your home now. The sooner you accept that, the happier we'll all be. With that," he left, closing the door quietly behind him. I stood in the center of the perfect nursery, my sleeping son in my arms, listening to the fading echo of Daniel's footsteps in the hallway. I moved to the window, looking out at the rain-slick gardens and the high stone wall beyond. Guards patrolled the perimeter, barely visible in the darkness, not to keep intruders out, I realized with a sinking heart, but to keep us in. Carefully, I laid Liam in his new crib, tucking the soft blanket around him. He stirred but didn't wake, his peaceful expression a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I trailed my fingers over the expensive wood of the crib, the hand-embroidered linens, all the things I could never have provided for him on my waitress salary. Was Daniel right? Had I been selfish, denying Liam a life of privilege out of fear and resentment? Or was I right to want to shield him from the violence and darkness that shadowed Daniel's world? I explored the adjoining room, my new prison cell. Luxurious as it was, a king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in cream-colored linens that probably cost more than a month's rent at my apartment. Fresh flowers sat on the bedside table, their subtle fragrance filling the air. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, with a tub large enough to swim in. Everything I could possibly need had been provided, right down to a closet already filled with clothes in my size. The thought of Daniel planning this, selecting these items for me, sent a shiver down my spine. How long had he been preparing for this moment? How confident had he been that he would eventually bring us here? I returned to Liam's crib, watching his tiny chest rise and fall with each breath. 6 months of running, of looking over my shoulder, of struggling to make ends meet, all undone in a single night. I'm sorry, I whispered to my sleeping son. I tried to give you a different life. But as I sank into the rocking chair beside his crib, a treacherous thought wormed its way into my mind. Here, at least, Liam would never go hungry. He would never wear secondhand clothes or live in a drafty apartment. He would have the best of everything: education, opportunities, security. All it would cost was our freedom. Outside, the rain continued to fall, drumming against the windows like fingers tapping impatiently, waiting for me to make my next move in a game I was already losing. I must have fallen asleep in the rocking chair, because I woke with a start to the sound of Liam's hungry cries. The sky outside had lightened to a pearly gray, dawn breaking over Daniel's estate. For a disorienting moment, I didn't recognize my surroundings, the elegant nursery a stark contrast to my humble apartment. Then reality crashed back. Daniel, the confrontation, our new gilded prison. I lifted Liam from his crib, murmuring soothing words as I settled back into the rocking chair to feed him. As he nursed, I studied his perfect face, counting each tiny eyelash, memorizing the curve of his cheek. He was the only thing that mattered now. Whatever happened, whatever decisions I had to make, they would be for him. A soft knock at the door made me tense. "Come in," I called, adjusting my shirt to cover myself. Maria entered, carrying a tray with steaming coffee and what smelled like freshly baked bread. "Good morning, Miss Walsh. I thought you might be hungry." Her eyes softened when she saw Liam. "He's beautiful. The image of his father." I bit back a sharp retort. It wasn't Maria's fault that we were here. "Thank you," I said instead, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. "What time is it?" "Just past 7. Mr. Valenti has been up for hours." She busied herself opening the curtains wider, letting in more light. "He said to tell you he's in his study when you're ready to talk, when I'm ready." As if I had a choice in the matter. "Is he always up this early?" Maria's smile was tired. "Mr. Valenti rarely sleeps more than 4 hours a night. Too much on his mind, I suppose." I remembered that about him, how I'd often wake in the middle of the night to find his side of the bed empty, the light from his study spilling under the door as he worked on whatever mysterious business kept him awake. "I've laid out some clothes for you in your bathroom," Maria continued, "and there are fresh towels if you'd like to shower." Liam had finished nursing and was contentedly falling back asleep. I carefully placed him in his crib before turning back to Maria. "Did he tell you who I am? Who we are?" The older woman met my eyes steadily. "Mr. Valenti doesn't need to tell me anything. I've known him since he was a boy. I can see his eyes in your son's face." She picked up a stray blanket and folded it precisely. And I remember the way he looked at you before you left, the way he looks at you still. Her words unsettled me. We're not here by choice. Maria's expression didn't change. Few choices in this life are entirely our own, Miss Walsh. Especially for women like us. She moved toward the door. The intercom by your bed connects to my quarters if you need anything. Mr. Valenti has cleared his schedule today to be with you and the baby. After she left, I showered quickly, the hot water failing to wash away the anxiety clinging to me like a second skin. The clothes Maria had laid out fit perfectly. Soft jeans and a cashmere sweater in a shade of blue I'd once mentioned was my favorite. The attention to detail was unsettling. It spoke of planning, of careful preparation for our arrival. Liam was still sleeping peacefully when I finished dressing. I kissed his forehead gently before leaving the nursery, making sure the baby monitor was on so I could hear if he woke. Finding Daniel's study wasn't difficult. I'd been there before, in our previous life together. The large mahogany doors were unmistakable, dominating the west wing of the mansion's second floor. I hesitated outside, gathering my courage before knocking softly. "Come in." His voice was calm, expectant. I pushed open the heavy door to find Daniel standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the expansive gardens. Morning sunlight streamed in, illuminating him from behind like some Renaissance painting of a powerful lord surveying his domain. He'd changed from last night's suit into more casual attire, dark jeans and a gray Henley that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. Emma. My name on his lips still had the power to send a shiver down my spine. "You slept well, I hope." "As well as can be expected," I replied, remaining by the door. Considering the circumstances, he gestured to one of the leather armchairs positioned in front of his massive desk. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Reluctantly, I took the offered seat, watching as he poured 2 cups of coffee from a silver carafe. "Black with 1 sugar," he said, handing me a cup. "You haven't changed your preference, I hope." The fact that he remembered such a small detail after all this time caught me off guard. "No, it's still the same." Daniel sat in the chair next to mine, rather than behind his desk, turning to face me directly. "I want to be clear about something, Emma. This isn't a punishment. This is me claiming my right to know my son, to be part of his life." His blue eyes held mine intently. "And to protect you both." "Protect us from what?" I asked, curling my fingers around the warm cup. "The dangers of a normal life? The horrors of public school and a middle-class existence?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Don't be naive. It doesn't suit you." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "My world has enemies, dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to use my son, or you, against me. The moment Liam was conceived, he became a target. Whether you're with me or not." Ice slid down my spine at his words. "No one knew about him. I made sure of it. And yet I found you," Daniel countered smoothly. "If I could track you down, others could too. The difference is, I want to keep you safe. They would want to hurt you, to get to me." I set my coffee down, suddenly unable to stomach it. "So this is our life now, locked away in your fortress for our own protection?" "This isn't a prison, Emma. It's a home. Your home." He gestured to the windows. "The grounds are extensive. There's a pool, gardens, a private theater. Maria can help you with anything you need. And when we go out, we'll have security, of course, but you'll hardly notice them. When we go out," I repeated flatly, "together. Like one big happy family." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "Is that so terrible? Providing our son with 2 parents who care for him? Giving him stability, security, everything a child deserves?" "Don't pretend this is just about Liam," I said, finding a thread of anger to cling to. "This is about control. It always has been with you." He set his own cup down with deliberate care. "You're right." The admission surprised me. This is partly about control. I can't control who targets my family, but I can control how well protected they are. His eyes locked with mine. "And yes, I want to control whether my son grows up knowing me or believing I abandoned him. Whether he has my name, my protection, my legacy." "Your legacy," I echoed bitterly. "Is that what you want for him, to follow in your footsteps, to become—" "Careful," he warned, his voice deceptively soft. I pushed on, recklessness fueling me. "To become what, Daniel?" A criminal? A killer? Is that the legacy you're so eager to pass on? In one fluid motion, he was on his feet, towering over me. My family has built something that has lasted for generations. Power, respect, influence. Yes, sometimes through means you find distasteful, but I protect what's mine, always. His eyes blazed with intensity. I would burn this city to the ground before I let anyone harm a hair on my son's head. Or yours. The vehemence in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, I found myself rising to meet him, refusing to be intimidated. And what about the harm that comes from growing up in this world? The moral cost? The danger that follows him every day of his life because of who his father is? As opposed to what? Daniel countered. Growing up in poverty? Struggling for every opportunity? Never knowing his father because his mother decided he was better off without me in his life? He stepped closer, until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. You had no right, Emma. No right to make that decision alone. I had every right, I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I'm his mother. I was protecting him. From me. The hurt in his voice was so raw, so unexpected, that it momentarily silenced me. You were protecting him from me. His father. Before I could respond, a small cry came through the baby monitor sitting on Daniel's desk. Liam was awake. The tension in the room deflated slightly at the sound. I need to go to him, I said, already moving toward the door. We'll continue this discussion later, Daniel said, his voice controlled once more. But make no mistake, Emma. You and Liam are staying here. That's non-negotiable. I paused at the door, looking back at him. And if I try to leave, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Don't. The simple word carried more threat than any elaborate warning could have. In the nursery, I found Liam fully awake, kicking his little legs in the air. His face lit up when he saw me, a toothless grin that momentarily pushed away the darkness of my confrontation with Daniel. Good morning, my love, I murmured, lifting him into my arms. Did you sleep well in your fancy new crib? As I changed his diaper, I heard footsteps approaching. Daniel appeared in the doorway, watching us with an unreadable expression. May I come in? He asked, a formality that seemed at odds with his earlier declarations of ownership. I nodded stiffly, focusing on dressing Liam in one of the new outfits that had mysteriously appeared in his dresser overnight. Daniel approached slowly, as if afraid of startling us. I thought perhaps we could have breakfast together, as a family. The last word held a weight, a significance that hung in the air between us. Family, I repeated, testing the word. Is that what we are? It's what we should be, he replied, his gaze fixed on Liam. It's what I want us to be. I looked up at him. Really looked, trying to reconcile the dangerous man I knew he was with the father he was trying to become. And what happens when your business interferes with family time, when someone needs to be dealt with during Liam's birthday party? Daniel's jaw tightened. My personal life and my business are separate matters. Are they? Because from where I'm standing, they seem inextricably linked. I lifted Liam into my arms, holding him close. Your world is violent, Daniel. Dangerous. How can you bring a child into that? My father brought me into it, he said quietly. My grandfather brought him into it. The cycle goes back generations. And look how well that turned out, I countered. Something flashed in his eyes, pain, or perhaps rage quickly suppressed. I am not my father, he said, each word carefully enunciated, and Liam will never experience what I did growing up. Never. There was such vehemence in his voice, such absolute certainty, that I found myself momentarily without a retort. I'd never heard Daniel speak of his childhood, beyond vague references to a strict upbringing. But the intensity in his eyes hinted at wounds that ran deeper than I'd imagined. Daniel, breakfast is ready when you are, he interrupted, clearly unwilling to continue that line of conversation. Maria has prepared everything in the garden room. It's a beautiful morning, and I thought Liam might enjoy seeing the flowers. The sudden shift to domestic normalcy was jarring. This man, who minutes ago had essentially threatened me if I tried to leave, was now calmly discussing breakfast plans as if we were any normal family. But we weren't normal. We would never be normal, and the sooner I accepted that reality, the better equipped I would be to navigate this new life, to find the cracks in my gilded cage, to protect Liam from the darkness of his father's world. "We'll be down shortly," I said, my tone deliberately neutral. Daniel nodded, reaching out to gently touch Liam's cheek before turning to leave. At the door, he paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "I meant what I said, Emma. I want us to be a family, a real family." His voice softened. "I know you don't trust me. You have reasons not to, but for Liam's sake, for all our sakes, I hope that can change." The garden room was a space I'd never seen during my time with Daniel before. A recent addition, with glass walls that created the illusion of dining directly among the manicured grounds. Morning sunlight streamed through, casting everything in a golden glow that felt mockingly cheerful given my circumstances. Maria had outdone herself with breakfast. The table was laden with fresh fruit, pastries, eggs prepared 3 different ways, and a carafe of orange juice that smelled freshly squeezed. It was the kind of spread you'd see in a luxury hotel, not a private home, even one as grand as this. I settled Liam into a high-end baby seat that had mysteriously appeared, complete with toys dangling at the perfect height for his curious fingers. Everything I could possibly need for him was already here, as if Daniel had been collecting baby items for months, waiting for the moment he could bring us home. "This is excessive," I said, gesturing at the elaborate spread as Daniel pulled out my chair. He took the seat opposite mine, his movements precise and controlled. "I wanted your first morning here to be special." "Special," I echoed, serving myself a small portion of eggs mostly to have something to do with my hands. "Is that what you call being forced to live somewhere against your will?" Daniel's expression didn't change, but I saw his knuckles whiten slightly around his coffee cup. "You make it sound like I've locked you in a dungeon, Emma. Look around you." He gestured to the sunlit garden beyond the glass. "This is hardly a prison. A gilded cage is still a cage," I countered, though the fight had gone out of my voice. I was exhausted, emotionally, physically, and the battle seemed pointless in the face of his absolute control. "You know," Daniel said, watching me over the rim of his cup, "many women would be grateful for this life. Security, luxury, a father who wants to be involved with his child. Many women haven't seen what I've seen," I replied quietly. "Haven't heard what I've heard." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And what exactly do you think you've seen, Emma?" I set my fork down carefully. 3 men came to your house late one night when you thought I was asleep. They brought someone with them, a man with a bag over his head. You took him to the basement. I met Daniel's gaze steadily. He never came back up. Daniel didn't flinch, didn't look away. "And you assume the worst." "What else should I assume?" "That there are aspects of my business that don't concern you," he said simply. "That I do what's necessary to protect what's mine." "And that's supposed to reassure me?" I shook my head in disbelief. "That's exactly why I left, Daniel. Your world is violent, dangerous." "My world is reality," he interrupted, his voice hardening. "The world you tried to hide in, that run-down neighborhood with drug deals happening on the corner and break-ins every week, that was more dangerous for Liam than anything here." Before I could respond, Liam began to fuss, as if sensing the tension between us. I reached for him automatically, but Daniel was faster, lifting our son from his seat with surprising gentleness. "Hey, little man," he murmured, his entire demeanor transforming as he held Liam against his chest. "What's all this about, The sight of Daniel, dangerous, powerful Daniel, cradling our son with such tenderness, created a dissonance I couldn't reconcile. This man, whose hands I knew had ordered violence, was now using those same hands to soothe his son with a gentleness that seemed completely at odds with everything I knew about him. Liam quieted almost immediately, his tiny fingers reaching for Daniel's face with curious fascination. "He likes you," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Daniel looked up, a genuine smile softening his features. "Of course he does. He knows who I am." He pressed a kiss to Liam's head, inhaling the baby scent of him. Children sense these things. Blood recognizes blood. I watched them together, this tableau of father and son that I'd tried so hard to prevent. Daniel murmured to Liam in Italian, words I couldn't understand but recognized from the few times I'd heard him speak with his family. It was jarring to realize that this was Liam's heritage too, not just the violence and power, but the language, the culture, the bonds of family that ran generations deep. "My father never held me like this," Daniel said suddenly, his eyes still on Liam. "Not once that I can remember." The admission caught me off guard. Daniel rarely spoke of his father, who had died before I met him. "Never?" He shook his head slightly. Antonio Valenti believed that affection made men weak. He ruled through fear. His family, his organization, everyone. His voice was matter-of-fact, devoid of self-pity. I was 5 the first time he made me watch a punishment. 10 when he put a gun in my hand and told me to use it. Horror washed over me at the casual revelation of childhood trauma. "Daniel, I'm not telling you this for sympathy," he said, correctly reading my expression. "I'm telling you because I need you to understand something." He looked down at Liam, who had fallen asleep against his chest. "I am not my father, and Liam's childhood will be nothing like mine." I wanted to point out the irony that by bringing Liam into this world of violence and power, he was already setting our son on a similar path. But the raw sincerity in Daniel's voice stopped me. "He's innocent," I said instead, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to protect that innocence as long as possible." "So do I," Daniel replied, surprising me. "But we live in the real world, Emma. And in the real world, the best protection isn't ignorance, it's preparation, strength, family." He gently transferred the sleeping Liam back to his seat. "My father taught me through cruelty and fear. I won't do that to my son, but I won't leave him vulnerable either." I pushed my plate away, no longer hungry. So what happens now? What does this new family life look like? Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me with those piercing blue eyes. "Day to day, it looks normal. You raise our son. I work. We have dinner together. On weekends, maybe we take him to the park or the zoo." His mouth quirked in a half-smile. "With security, of course. And my life? My independence?" I asked. "Do I just disappear into these walls, existing only as Liam's mother and your... what? Your captive?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You're not a captive, Emma. You're the mother of my child under my protection. There's a difference." He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. "If you want to work, fine. Go back to school. Finish that nursing degree you always talked about. I'll arrange it." Just like that? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Just like that. He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "I don't want to clip your wings, Emma. I just want you both safely in my nest." The metaphor wasn't lost on me, the predator bringing his quarry home, providing for them, protecting them, but never truly letting them fly free. It was possession disguised as care. "I need time," I said finally. "This is a lot to adjust to." Daniel nodded, seemingly satisfied with this small concession. "Time is one thing I can give you." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in a familiar gesture that reminded me painfully of our past life together. "I have some business to attend to this morning, but I'll be back for lunch. Maria will help you with anything you need, and there are 2 men stationed outside should you require assistance. Guards, not helpers." The distinction was clear, despite his careful phrasing. "When you say business," I trailed off, not sure I wanted the answer. Daniel's smile was cold. "Nothing that need concern you." As he leaned down to kiss Liam's forehead, I noticed a flash of metal at his waist, the butt of a gun, partially concealed by his jacket. He caught my gaze and straightened, making no attempt to hide it. "A necessary precaution," he said simply. "The world is dangerous, Emma, especially for men like me." After he left, I sat in the sunlight of the garden room, watching Liam sleep peacefully, unaware of the complicated web he'd been born into. My mind raced with possibilities, plans, scenarios, none of them viable. Running was impossible now. Daniel would find us again, and his retribution would be swift. Staying meant accepting this new reality, finding a way to carve out some semblance of independence within these gilded walls. I carried Liam back to the nursery, placing him in his crib for his morning nap. As I turned to leave, I noticed something on the changing table that hadn't been there earlier. A small velvet box with my name written on a card in Daniel's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it to find a delicate platinum pendant, a filigree cage containing what appeared to be a tiny diamond bird, suspended as if in flight. The symbolism wasn't subtle, a beautiful cage, a trapped bird. A message and a warning wrapped in the guise of a gift. I closed the box without removing the necklace, setting it aside as I tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. My entire life had been upended, my plans destroyed, my future recalibrated to orbit around Daniel Valenti and his world. A soft knock at the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Maria entered with an armful of fresh linens, her expression softening when she saw Liam sleeping peacefully. "He settles well here," she observed, setting the linens on a shelf. "Some babies are sensitive to new places. Not this one. He's adaptable," I said, wondering if that trait would serve him well or poorly in the life ahead of him. "Maria, can I ask you something?" The older woman nodded, her dark eyes watchful. "How long have you worked for the Valenti family?" "Since before Daniel was born," she replied, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle from the linens. "I came from Italy with his grandfather, to help care for his father, Antonio. So you've seen everything." I chose my words carefully. The business, the lifestyle, all of it. Maria's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held a wealth of understanding. "I have seen 3 generations of Valenti men, yes, the good and the bad. And Daniel?" I pressed. "What kind of man is he, really, beyond what I've seen?" She was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing her response carefully. "Mr. Valenti is not his father," she said finally. "Thank God for that. Antonio was cruel, cold. He saw weakness as something to be punished, not protected." She glanced at Liam, her expression softening. "Daniel has his father's strength, his determination, but not his cruelty. He protects what he loves, fiercely. Sometimes too fiercely. Is that supposed to reassure me?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Maria looked at me directly, her gaze unflinching. "In this world, Miss Walsh, there are no guarantees, only choices between difficult paths." She moved toward the door, pausing before she left. "But I will tell you this. I have never seen Daniel look at anyone the way he looks at you and that child. Whatever else he is, whatever else he does, that love is real." After she was gone, I sat in the rocking chair by Liam's crib, Maria's words echoing in my mind. Love. Was that what this was? This possessive, controlling behavior that Daniel called protection? I thought back to our time together before I knew the truth, the tenderness he'd shown me, the way he'd listened when I talked about my dreams, the rare moments of vulnerability when he'd let his guard down completely. Had that been real, or just another facet of his manipulation? And even if it had been real, could love exist alongside the darkness I knew lived within him? Could I learn to accept both sides of him? For Liam's sake? For my own? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswerable. For now, all I could do was watch over my sleeping son and try to find a path forward through the beautiful, dangerous labyrinth that Daniel Valenti had built around us. 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo of domestic routine and unspoken tension. Each day blended into the next, marked by Liam's schedule of feedings and naps, quiet meals with Daniel when he was home, and long hours alone exploring the mansion's vast rooms and gardens. Daniel had been true to his word about giving me space. He never pushed for more than I was willing to give, maintaining a careful distance that was both a relief and, strangely, a disappointment. Each night, he kissed Liam goodnight, and then retreated to his own suite, leaving me alone in my adjoining room to the nursery. But I wasn't naive enough to mistake space for freedom. The estate was heavily guarded, the gates monitored constantly. When I asked to go shopping, 2 security men accompanied us, maintaining a discreet but unmistakable presence. When I took Liam for walks in the extensive gardens, I noticed cameras tracking our movements, and occasionally caught glimpses of men patrolling the perimeter. A beautiful prison, but a prison nonetheless. Yet as days turned to weeks, I found myself settling into a rhythm, finding small pockets of normalcy within this bizarre new reality. Daniel had arranged for my things to be brought from the apartment. My books, my few pieces of jewelry, the handmade quilt my grandmother had given me before she died. These familiar objects helped anchor me, reminders of who I was beyond Daniel Valenti's woman or Liam's mother. I was arranging these books on a shelf in my room when Daniel appeared in the doorway, watching me with those intense blue eyes. "May I come in?" he asked, always careful to respect the boundaries of my space. I nodded, shelving the last book before turning to face him. He looked tired, I realized. The past weeks had etched new lines around his eyes, a tightness in his jaw that hadn't been there before. "I have to go out of town," he said without preamble. "Business in New York. I'll be gone for 3 days." Something fluttered in my chest, hope, perhaps, at this first real opportunity to be free of his watchful presence. "When do you leave?" "Tonight." He moved further into the room, maintaining a careful distance between us. "The house will be fully staffed, and Marco will be in charge of security. If you need anything at all, you call him directly." I nodded, struggling to hide the calculations already running through my mind. 3 days without Daniel, 3 days to plan, to think, maybe even to... "Don't," he said softly, reading my expression with unsettling accuracy. "Whatever you're thinking, Emma, don't." "I don't know what you mean," I replied, turning away to straighten books that were already perfectly aligned. In 3 quick strides, he crossed the room, his hand gently but firmly catching my wrist. "Look at me." Reluctantly, I met his gaze. "I know you're not happy here yet," he said, emphasizing the yet in a way that sent a chill down my spine. "I know you still see this as captivity rather than protection, but I need you to understand something." His grip tightened slightly. "If you try to leave while I'm gone, I will find you. No matter where you go, no matter how well you hide, I will find you again." "And then what?" I challenged, refusing to be intimidated. "You'll drag me back here? Lock me in a room? What happens the 3rd time I run, Daniel? Or the 4th? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "There won't be a 3rd time, Emma. Because you're smarter than that." He released my wrist, stepping back. "And because deep down, you know this is where you and Liam belong." Before I could formulate a response, Liam's cries came through the baby monitor. I moved to go to him, but Daniel touched my arm, stopping me. "Let me," he said. And there was something in his voice, a vulnerability, a request rather than a command, that made me nod in agreement. I followed him to the nursery, watching from the doorway as he lifted Liam from his crib with practiced ease. In the weeks we'd been here, Daniel had thrown himself into fatherhood with a dedication that continually surprised me. He changed diapers, gave bottles, seemed to genuinely delight in every small development in Liam's rapidly changing world. "Hey, little man," he murmured, cradling Liam against his chest. "What's all this noise about, Liam quieted immediately at the sound of his father's voice, his tiny hand reaching up to grasp Daniel's finger. The sight sent an unexpected pang through my chest, a complicated tangle of emotions I wasn't ready to unravel. "I'll miss you," Daniel said softly to Liam, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Both of you," he added, glancing up to meet my eyes. Something in his expression made it hard to breathe. An intensity, a hunger that had nothing to do with power or control. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd fallen in love with, before I knew the truth about him. The man who'd brought me coffee in bed, who'd listened for hours as I talked about my dreams, who'd looked at me as if I were the most precious thing in his world. But that man was a fiction, I reminded myself harshly, a carefully constructed facade hiding the real Daniel Valenti. The man who'd threatened me, who'd forced us into this gilded cage, who carried a gun as casually as others carried car keys. "We'll be fine," I said, my voice cooler than I intended. "It's only 3 days." And Daniel handed Liam to me, his fingers brushing mine in the transfer. The brief contact sent an unwelcome spark through me, a reminder of the chemistry that had always existed between us, even now. 3 days, he echoed, his gaze lingering on my face. "I'll call to check in." After he left, I sat in the rocking chair, Liam nestled against me, and allowed myself to think about escape for the first time in weeks. Without Daniel's overwhelming presence, the possibility seemed more real, more tangible. But the logistics were daunting. The estate was heavily guarded. I had no car, no money, no allies who weren't loyal to Daniel first. And then there was the question that had been haunting me with increasing frequency. Was leaving still what I wanted? Liam was thriving here. He had everything a baby could need: security, comfort, 2 parents who adored him. And I was no longer struggling to make ends meet, no longer working double shifts at a diner, leaving my son with whoever was available. I had time with him now, unrushed, precious time watching him grow. The prison had become comfortable, and that realization terrified me more than any of Daniel's veiled threats. Daniel had been gone for just over 24 hours when it happened. I was in the garden with Liam, enjoying the unseasonably warm afternoon, when I noticed Maria hurrying toward us, her usually composed face tight with tension. "Miss Walsh," she called, her voice strained. "You need to come inside, now." Something in her tone made me scoop Liam up immediately, hurrying to meet her. "What's wrong?" "Inside first," she insisted, already ushering me toward the house. I noticed 2 security men had materialized nearby, scanning the grounds with alert eyes. In the kitchen, Maria closed and locked the door behind us, drawing the curtains over the windows. "Mr. Marco asked me to keep you and the baby in the safe room until he gives the all clear," she explained, already moving toward a panel in the wall I'd never noticed before. "Safe room. Maria, what's happening?" Fear clutched at my throat, made worse by her obvious reluctance to explain. She pressed her palm against the panel, revealing a hidden keypad. "There's been a situation with one of Mr. Valenti's business rivals." She punched in a code, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a reinforced door. "It's just a precaution, but Mr. Marco insists." A precaution. The clinical word barely masked the reality. We were in danger. The violence of Daniel's world had finally reached us, exactly as I'd feared it would. The safe room was more like a small apartment, with basic furnishings, a bathroom, and what looked like enough supplies to last for days. Maria helped me settle Liam, who was growing fussy, sensing the tension around him. "How long do we need to stay here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm for Liam's sake. "Just until Mr. Marco gives the all clear," Maria repeated, though I noticed she avoided my eyes. "Try to rest. I'll bring you updates as I have them." After she left, the reinforced door sliding shut with a pneumatic hiss, I sat on the edge of the bed, Liam cradled in my arms, my mind racing. This was the reality I'd been dreading. The inevitable moment when Daniel's criminal activities endangered our son, all his talk of protection, of keeping us safe. And yet here we were, locked in a panic room because someone was threatening us. Hours passed. Liam fell asleep, oblivious to the danger. I paced the small room, checking my phone periodically, though there was no signal here. Finally, the intercom on the wall crackled to life. "Emma?" Daniel's voice, tense and urgent. I rushed to the speaker. "Daniel, what's happening? Where are you?" "Still in New York." His voice was clipped, controlled, but I could hear the underlying fury. "Are you and Liam all right?" "We're fine," I assured him, but locked in a safe room with no explanation. "Daniel, what's going on?" There was a brief pause. "Someone tried to breach the estate's security. My men handled it, but I'm not taking any chances. Stay where you are until I get home." "When will that be?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. "I'm on my way now. Private jet. 3 hours, maybe 4. His voice softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Emma. This shouldn't have happened." After he disconnected, I sat beside Liam's makeshift crib, watching him sleep peacefully, unaware of the danger lurking beyond our reinforced walls. All my fears, all my objections to raising him in Daniel's world, had been validated in the most terrifying way. And yet, paradoxically, I found myself grateful for the very security measures I'd resented. The guards, the cameras, the safe room that now protected us. Without them, what would have happened today? True to his word, Daniel returned just over 3 hours later. When the safe room door opened, he stood there, still in his travel clothes, his face haggard with worry and rage barely held in check. "Emma," he breathed, crossing the room in 3 long strides and pulling me into his arms. I should have resisted, should have maintained the careful distance I'd established between us. Instead, I found myself melting against him, the fear of the past hours dissolving in the solid strength of his embrace. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, pulling back to examine my face. "Either of you?" "We're fine," I assured him, surprised by the tremor in my voice. "Just scared." "Daniel, what happened? Who tried to get in?" His expression darkened. "Men working for Alexei Baranov. A Russian who's been trying to move into my territory for months. And did your men—" I couldn't bring myself to finish the question. Daniel's eyes met mine unflinchingly. "2 of Baranov's men won't be reporting back to him. The 3rd is being questioned." The cold pragmatism with which he delivered this news should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a strange, guilty relief. These men had come for us, for my baby, and they had been stopped, permanently. Was this because of us? I asked quietly. Were they targeting Liam and me specifically? Daniel's jaw tightened. Yes. Baranov thought if he could get to you, he could control me. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was wrong. I moved to Liam's crib, watching his peaceful sleep, untouched by the violence that had swirled around him. "This is what I was afraid of," I whispered. "This is why I ran." Daniel came to stand beside me, his presence both comforting and intimidating. "And yet, if you had been anywhere else, that apartment, some anonymous town across the country, you wouldn't have had 20 armed men protecting you. You wouldn't have had a safe room to retreat to." His voice dropped lower. "You and Liam would be gone, and I would have lost everything." The raw honesty in his voice made me look up at him. For the first time, I saw past the powerful facade to the vulnerability beneath. The genuine fear at the thought of losing us. "What happens now?" I asked. "Baranov will be dealt with," he said simply. "Permanently. No one threatens my family and lives to tell about it." I should have been appalled by the casual way he spoke of murder. Instead, I found myself nodding, a primitive part of me approving of this lethal protection. What did that say about me? About what I was becoming in this world? "And us?" I pressed. "What happens to us, Daniel?" He turned to face me fully, his eyes intense. "That depends on you. Today proved what I've been telling you all along. The world is dangerous, Emma. I can't change that, but I can protect you from it." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away before cupping my cheek in his palm. "Stay. Not as my prisoner, but as my partner. Let me keep you both safe." I wanted to argue, to point out that the danger itself stemmed from his lifestyle, his choices. But the events of the day had shaken me to my core. Out there, alone, we would be vulnerable. Here with Daniel, we were protected. By walls and guards, yes, but also by the absolute, terrifying devotion of a man who would burn the world to keep us safe. Was that love? I didn't know anymore, but as I looked at my sleeping son, then back at Daniel, I realized I was willing to find out. "Partners," I said softly, testing the word. "Not possessions." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, perhaps, or hope. "Partners," he agreed, his thumb brushing my cheekbone in a gesture both tender and possessive. "Always." As he pulled me into his arms again, I knew this wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be struggles ahead, compromises, moments when the darkness of his world threatened to engulf us, but there would also be protection, security, and perhaps, in time, a different kind of love than the one I'd first imagined. Fiercer, more complex, born of shared danger and mutual need rather than simple attraction. For Liam's sake, for my own, I would navigate this dangerous new reality. I would learn to be strong in ways I'd never imagined. And perhaps someday, I would stop seeing these walls as a prison and start seeing them as Daniel did, as a fortress, protecting everything he loved most in the world. For now, that would have to be enough.